Good morning, and thanks so much for tuning into the Trade Setup. I'm Neeraj Shah. Let's take stock of what the world markets are up to post the Fed. Actually, the Fed minutes were important, right? Because, um, you know, if the December policy was not enough, there's an unequivocal message given by the Fed. The minutes say that an unwarranted easing in financial conditions, especially if driven by a misperception by the public of the committee's reaction function, would complicate the committee's effort to restore price stability. It's almost expressing frustration at the market's expectations of thinking that the Fed will start easing soon. This is as clear as it gets, viewers. So yes, the Fed was unequivocally clear in its hawkish stance or higher for longer stance, even if the quantum of rate increases were to be lower as opposed to the 75 pips that have been done. So I think that was the first key thing. Then the news flow. EU has urged COVID travel screening for passengers from China. And that's a big thing because now multiple countries are talking about this because of the surge in COVID cases that we are seeing. I mean, I was surprised that WHO of all organizations is also asked for some reports from China for what's happening on that. And I hope that the WHO takes notice of this very seriously because the spread out there is quite something. Amazon is going to cut 70% more jobs than previously planned as per WSJ, but Amazon itself has said that they will probably cut about 18,000 jobs, which is probably not as high as what WSJ might be reporting. Oil has edged, and this is this is important because job cuts in a very converse or a perverse sort of a way kind of lead to labor inflation in the US coming off. So that's the point. Oil has edged marginally higher after the 2-day slump of over 9%. But 2 days, it slumped 9%. That's a big drop there. And India cabinet has approved a 2.4 billion incentive for green hydrogen. All companies which are in this might be pretty happy with this, and it's great from a country's perspective as well. So the US markets, after the Fed minutes came out, paired some of its gains, but still ending about 0.75% higher, which is not bad. Yields came off despite the Fed commentary, and that is interesting. 3.7 if I'm not wrong. 3.7, yes. US near yield at 3.7. S&P VIX at about 22, and dollar index at 103.85. No big changes there, but for the fact that the yields, despite the Fed's minutes hawkishness, came down as opposed to move up. Pretty interesting reaction, something that Jeffrey Dennis has been talking about as well on this very show. The SGX Nifty indicates a start which is flattish, about 28 odd points. So no big shakes there after the sharp gash that we saw in trade yesterday. So therefore, what's the trade setup? I think, I mean, just the headline indices notwithstanding, because we don't quite know what they are doing these days, but specific pockets are the ones to focus on. So, for the last few days, multiple people have been talking about banks and how strong the numbers are likely to be. But I think what is clearly evident that there's a consensus long positioning in financials ahead of this potentially strong Q3 season. And that is evident from the tepid reaction to reasonably strong business updates. IndusInd Bank, a case in point yesterday. Interesting to see what an RBL or an AU, SFB or a Bajaj Finance go through today, because the updates are reasonably strong. But clearly there has been pre-positioning out there, which is leading to the reactions being very, very tepid. Long anticipated, much anticipated strong numbers, and therefore the reactions are very, very tepid. So maybe from a trade perspective, it's not necessarily a great idea to go out and buy any of these stocks after they start with a bit of a gap up. Again, case in point being IndusInd Bank yesterday. Marico's commentary on rural markets may impact the rural focused stocks, to my mind, and the pre-budget beneficiaries and oil beneficiaries likely remain in focus. Very difficult to find ideas currently, but except from an earnings perspective. And then from an earnings perspective, I really doubt that IT will see a major upward reaction ahead of TCS. And therefore, you kind of focus on pre-budget beneficiaries, which have typically done well ahead of a budget, or oil because oil beneficiaries because oil has clearly slumped quite significantly, and that might help trigger positive commentary or positive sentiment in these names as well. In light of all of this, what are the stocks to watch out for today? First, Adani Ports, the business updates for December. So the total cargo handled grew 8%, which is not a bad number, but compared to the estimated, or rather compared to the math of what is needed for the company to meet even the lower end of its annual guidance, this number puts a very stiff ask on the company for the months to come or for the quarter to come. So, cargo volumes, 253 million metric tons during the April to December period. Now, in order to meet the 350 million metric tons guidance for the year, the ask on the company is much, much stiffer for the remaining 3 months, and therefore, therein lies the problem. Now, I remember the stock has corrected from those near 900 levels all the way to 810, but this is not uh, a positive outcome. You may well see a bit of a reaction on the stock today as well. So watch out for Adani Ports. Bajaj Finance Q3 update seems strong. AUM rose 27%. New loan accounts grew 5.4%. Deposit book grew 41%. You would argue that compared to the standards that it has set, the 21%, 27% growth in the AUM or otherwise is okay, but the loan growth may not be the strongest. And that's the point I think that Morgan Stanley is making. So they have an overweight stance with the target price of 8,900, but they say that the QOQ loan growth is a tad softer than the usual 7% seen in the festive quarter. Now, it may well be because Q2 was very strong for Bajaj Finance, and therefore to do a sequential much better 7%, higher than 7% loan growth might be a bit difficult, but certainly in festive season, you expect BAF to actually have this very strong number. It's not the usual number, so tad softer. But the new customer acquisition is strong. It's on course to cross its annual target. And the deposit growth is strong at 9% QOQ or rising 41% on YOY basis to 43,000 crores. That's not a bad number per se. So um, mixed but with a slightly positive bias, I would reckon, is how you would term Bajaj Finance's Q3 update. Now, does it mean that the stock reacts positively? Maybe it does because BAF is not in the league of the banks which have had a meaningful rally in the October, November, December quarter. If anything, the stock had come off a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see what it does today. Marico, a weaker than anticipated Q3 update. The consolidated revenue in the quarter for the company grew in low single digits on an annual basis. The gross and operating margins are expected to improve as per the company, both on a sequential and on a year basis, not unanticipated considering the fall in most input prices, but for copra prices, which have actually started to firm up a little bit. But the more important point from my perspective is that the company said that even in December, that the rural market recovery was not visible. And therein lies the problem for a bunch of these FMCG players which are focused on rural market because that demand is not coming. And that is a problem. And I think you would probably see this impact being seen on the FMCG space. I mean, this may be Marico's problem and not necessarily the others, but you would argue that if Marico is saying that rural recovery is not being seen, the others' commentary and experience might not be too different. And therefore, that's something you want to bear in mind. RBL Bank business updates, total deposits increased about 11%. AU Small Finance Bank, the numbers seemed okay as well. So the CASA deposits increased about 18%, gross advances 14%. So both RBL, AU Small Finance Bank most certainly had a fairly strong update as well. But you don't know whether there will be a reaction, positive reaction to these banking updates. So bear that in mind. Some other stocks in news, and M&M Financial could well turn out to be one of the stocks of the day because the RBI has lifted restrictions on appointing third-party agents for recovery or repossession. Now, this is important. It's also important from a timing perspective because it's happened at the start of a busy quarter four. Usually Q4 is seasonally strong as well. It's happened earlier than what a lot of people anticipated. But I distinctly remember that on the day when this update came in, after an initial shock reaction, it was not that the stock had a terrible reaction on the same day. So from a day trade perspective, if it does open gap up, I don't quite know how much of potential upside is left after that. But most brokerages believe that this is sentimentally a positive, and thereby I say that it could well turn out to be a stock of the day wherein it does have a positive start. Let's wait and watch. SJVN, the cabinet has approved the investment of 2,614 crores for the company's 382 megawatt project in Himachal Pradesh. So that is something to be watched out for as well. I will also watch out for GR Infra Projects. It's won an NHAI order worth 1,085 crores. May react a little bit. So let's wait and watch if this one has a positive reaction or no. Um, the big push on green hydrogen that I was talking about at the start of the trade setup. So CLSA has a note wherein they say that companies with GH2 transition exposure include NTPC, Power Grid, Adani Enterprises, Reliance, L&T, MTAR, uh, Linde India, IOC, and Gale. So do watch out for these names. These are the ones that might be interesting play on this 2.4 billion push from the government on green hydrogen incentive. So that is something to be certainly watched out for. Well, that's the long and short of the trade setup today. A flattish to a marginally positive start, but we've had a bit of a correction behind us yesterday. A sharp drop. Does it magnify, or based on global tailwinds, we have a bit of a recovery? Remember, the US futures are flat as we speak. So that is to be kept in mind. M&M Financial, some of the green hydrogen names, maybe a Bajaj Finance on the positive side. Watch out for banks, good updates, but may not react. Watch out for Adani Ports, has already reacted quite a bit, but may still have, who knows, a negative reaction to this piece of news. So um, a bunch of names to be watched out for. And the budget suspects, fertilizers, and they have a bit of a negative news, of course, but fertilizers and railway names, so on and so forth, might all remain in focus the whole of this month. Thanks so much for tuning into the trade setup. And I know we had mentioned that Howard Marks' interview will be played out tomorrow at 10 a.m. There might be a bit of a change to that, viewers, because there has been a bit of a change in the recording schedule. We'll keep you updated with when that happens. At 10 a.m. today, though, Vetri Subramaniam will be an interesting conversation to tune in case you want a large mutual funds view on how they are positioning themselves for the quarter or rather the year ahead. So try and tune in for that. Thanks so much for tuning into the Trade Setup.